Hey everybody, I hope we are all doing good tonight. I am gonna start the slideshow here, and can you guys all see that? Okay. So, cat behavior. So let's dive right in. Cats, we think, were domesticated somewhere between 5,000 and 9,000 years ago. And as far as domestication in cats go, they don't necessarily meet all of the criteria that we typically think of when we think of domestication as far as the true definition of domestication. So this has kind of been a little bit of a debate for a while is, well, are cats truly technically domesticated? Because technically, to be considered a domesticated species, humans would need to control the breeding, the food supply, their territory, all of that kind of stuff. And as we know with our kitties, a lot of times we don't control exactly what they're eating. If they're hunting, we don't necessarily always control their breeding. And same thing with feral cats and territory. So it's one of those things where are cats truly domesticated? Yes, we call them a domesticated species. We consider them to be domesticated, but maybe that's not necessarily technically true. So cats, part of the reason why I think that we tend to see a lot of questions, issues, things like that with cats is because they do retain a lot of their sort of wild tendencies still, those wild behaviors. And so we're going to get into that a little bit further throughout the presentation, but I thought that was kind of interesting just to kind of bring up that this is sort of something that's a little bit debated. And to keep going here. So we're going to talk about a few different types of behaviors tonight. One is innate behavior of cats. And so innate behaviors are considered to be the behaviors that essentially are kind of hardwired into those kitty brains, the things that they are just kind of born knowing how to do or having a drive to do. We're going to talk about the social behavior of cats. So how do cats interact with other cats as well as with us? We're going to talk a lot about communication. Ways in which cats communicate, which is very different from how humans tend to communicate. And then we're going to touch at the end, we're going to get into a little bit on some problem behaviors that we tend to see in our kitties and why they sort of develop these behaviors and what can we do to kind of manage these. So innate behaviors, sleeping. So we all know cats tend to sleep a lot. And there tends to be this thought that, well, cats are sort of nocturnal. They're really not. So cats just have very different sleep-wake cycles than we do. And so in the wild, cats normally will sleep between hunting. And so they often will hunt anywhere from 10 to 20 times per day. And so they will take naps between these hunts in order to conserve energy. And so because they are usually out hunting for prey at times when prey is more active, like dawn and dusk, we may see our kitties be more active during these times, just because that's sort of the natural times when they would be hunting. But on average, cats tend to sleep quite a lot more than we do. So they do tend to sleep on average anywhere between like 13 to 18 hours per day. That changes a little bit based on age. So your younger kitties are going to sleep a little less. Your older kitties are going to sleep a little more. But in general, cats, aren't necessarily nocturnal creatures, but they don't tend to just have the same kind of up during the day, asleep at night kind of routine that we have. But you can definitely kind of teach your cat how to adapt to that. So, we obviously don't want our kitties running around all hours of the night making noise while we're sleeping. So the more active your cat is going to be during the day, the more they are likely to sleep at night. So a lot of cats will adapt to their kind of humans sleep cycles as well, but just kind of in general, their brains are sort of hardwired for this short periods of sleep and wake throughout the day. So, okay, moving on. So eating and hunting. So most people would think that these are actually sort of the same drive in cats. So they hunt because they want to eat, but not necessarily. So hunting is actually not necessarily related to hunger. So cats don't necessarily hunt just because they're hungry. They hunt because this is a drive that they have sort of maintained throughout history, just to want to hunt. And so this is the reason why, cats will kill prey and not eat it, or why a lot of pet cats will catch things and not necessarily kill it. So, if you're wondering, well, why is my pet kitty hunting all the time? He's very well fed. That's because it's not necessarily because he's hungry. He just still has this drive to hunt and kill prey. And so, it's one of those things that we can't really suppress in them at all. So it's one of these things in kitties that they want to do it, they need to do it. And that is why with a lot of indoor kitties, if they are having a lot of stress, one of the main things that we want to make sure they're doing is that they have toys and they're able to play and sort of mimic hunting, because if they're not able to kind of mimic this hunting and catching prey, then we tend to see them develop a lot of anxiety and different problem behaviors because of that. So most cats do need to kind of get this prey hunting drive out in some form, whether they are, actually out catching prey, or whether that's, chasing a toy in the house, or things like that. And so not related to eating, but on the subject of eating, as far as cats and what they eat and how frequently they eat, I think it's pretty well known cats are carnivores, and so they are mainly meat eaters. That doesn't mean that they are exclusively carnivore, so they can eat other things as well, but the majority of their diet tends to be meat. And cats in the wild will typically eat multiple small prey throughout the day. And so cats kind of naturally have this feeding drive that is to eat just kind of small portions very frequently. So cats aren't really hardwired to meal feed as humans would. So they're not sort of hardwired to be hungry every so often, 2 to 3 times a day, like we would feed ourselves or our dogs. They are more likely to want to eat a little bit, go take a nap for a while, come back later, eat a little more. So they're kind of just typically grazers. And so that's mostly what they would naturally gravitate towards as far as how they would tend to eat if we were not involved, humans were not involved. But for many reasons. Many cats are meal fed. So, for instance, cats that are on diets because we're overweight, or diabetic kitties, or things like that. So, those cats, we definitely are trying to get them on specific feeding schedules, and they can definitely do well with it. So that doesn't mean that you cannot meal feed your cat. You absolutely can, and they absolutely can do fine with it. But if left to their own devices, most cats tend to graze. However, we know that some of our chubby kitties do tend to want to scarf down the whole bowl of food all at once. And so those kitties, tend to need to be kind of meal fed. So let's move on here. Okay, so social behavior in cats. So cats, for the most part, tend to be solitary creatures in the wild. And so your average, feral cat outside is typically not going to live in a group of many other cats. That doesn't mean this doesn't happen. So if there is enough resources available, so if there is an area with a lot of food available, a lot of space, then you will definitely see cats living together. This tends to be groups of females, though. So most of the time when we're seeing cats that are living in large groups, then typically those are groups of females with maybe one male, because the males tend to be much more territorial. And so we tend to see maybe one male with a large group of females if they are living in groups. But for the most part, most cats will choose to live kind of a solitary life. Cats would do very well with quarantine. But the reason for this is they tend to be extremely territorial. So a lot of feral cats that have been studied, we have found that they will actually claim territory as large as 2 square miles. So they will actually kind of claim large swaths of territory and drive other cats out. And so this is something that, because cats are very territorial, this is something that in multi-cat households is often a source of tension between kitties. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But just in general, cats tend to be super territorial, kind of keep to themselves. And as far as, conflict, cats love to avoid conflict at all costs. And so this is another reason they tend to be quite solitary. So when we do see cats that are living together, so cats in multi-cat households, a big thing for them to kind of keep them happy and keep them stress-free is making sure that they have areas of privacy. They also need the ability to escape stressful situations. And another thing that I think, a lot of us know about cats is they tend to seek high places. And one of the reasons for that is, other than the fact that they want to, get away from predators or just kind of be alone, they also like to just kind of be able to see their territory, so to speak. And so they want to be able to kind of survey areas where they have claimed. We're gonna get into a little bit more later how this kind of can create some problem behaviors in kitties, but important thing that we're gonna remember about kitties is that very territorial. Okay, so now we're gonna get into communication with kitties. So obviously one of the big things that ways that we know cats communicate vocally, at least with us, is by meowing. One of the interesting things about meowing is that we know that cats in the wild, so feral cats, cats that are not used to human interaction, do not tend to meow to each other. So this is not a type of vocalization that we will see from cat to cat. So cats don't necessarily communicate with each other in this way. Meowing is actually primarily a way that kittens will communicate with the mother and vice versa. And so we tend to see this carry on into human cat communication, essentially because most cats kind of view us as big mama cats, essentially. So because of this, they sort of retain that meowing vocal communication like they would with the mother cat, and they use that to communicate with us. So kind of an interesting point there. And that's not to say that feral cats do not meow, because they do, and we know they do, but it's just not something that they typically will, a way they would use to communicate with one another. Purring, so that's another important way kitties communicate, not necessarily with each other, but more so, again, with us as well. And purring can actually mean lots of things in cats. So, we used to think cats purr only when they're happy, but they don't purr just when they're happy. We actually know that cats can purr for multiple reasons. So one of the reasons being that they are feeling stressed or anxious. And so when cats are feeling stressed or anxious, they will purr sort of as a self-soothing mechanism. And so the frequency with which they purr, the vibrations that creates can actually release endorphins, which can actually kind of make them feel better. So cats will kind of purr essentially to calm themselves down when they're feeling very stressed. So I see lots of kitties that come into my office all the time, and they're purring during their exam, not because they're super happy to see me, but because they're very scared and they're just trying to kind of calm themselves down and soothe themselves. And then one of the other reasons cats will purr that a lot of people may not be aware of is cats can actually purr when they're painful as well. So I will have people that come in and they'll say, oh, well, I don't think my cat is uncomfortable or painful because, he's purring. That means he's happy. Not necessarily. So cats will actually purr if they're painful, because the purring will actually, number one, same thing with anxiety and stress, like we mentioned before. Number one, it can release endorphins, so that can make them feel better. And those endorphins will actually help relieve pain as well. So cats will actually a lot of times purr because it actually does help with pain. And then another interesting thing, so the vibrations that cats are creating when they purr, there have been several studies that have shown that actually can help with healing. And so we've known for a very long time that cats are great healers. So compared to dogs and other animals, cats tend to heal much faster, particularly with things like broken bones. And so one of the reasons that we have found that may be is because of purring. So those vibrations that they're creating can actually encourage healing, and especially bone healing. So there's sort of this saying in vet medicine with cats, if they have a broken bone and you put those two bones in the same room, it will heal eventually. And so one of the reasons for this is probably because of the kind of healing powers of purring. So, and then of course, Hissing and growling. I, probably don't need to really explain this, but obviously, if we're upset, we will hiss and growl, and that is a communication both with humans and with other kitties to say that we are upset. And then one of the more interesting vocalizations that cats will make is kind of this chattering, or sometimes you'll see it called chittering or chirping sometimes too. So that's kind of that teeth chattering that cats will do when they are kind of looking out the window, if we're seeing birds or if we're seeing squirrels or chipmunks or things outside. And so when they're doing this, sometimes they'll actually make noise when they do this. Sometimes they won't. It's more of just a silent kind of chattering of the jaw. And there's actually been a lot of studies done on why cats tend to do this. And there are several different explanations for this. And so, there's one study that predicts that, cats are doing this to kind of impersonate their prey. So because cats typically tend to do this when they're watching birds, there is the thought that, are they trying to mimic bird noises? One of the other thoughts is that they are sort of simulating the kill bite that they would use to kill prey. So the thought is that they're kind of warming up their jaws to go in and kill prey. So that's kind of one of the other thoughts on why cats do this. And then another study showed that, cats may actually just be doing this out of frustration because we don't necessarily notice cats doing this when they are in the wild. So cats in the wild don't necessarily tend to do this behavior before they catch prey. So one thought is, well, we see indoor cats doing this when they're watching prey that they can't actually catch because they're frustrated that they can't actually go and catch it. So the truth is we don't necessarily 100% know why kitties do this. So several different possibilities on why cats may do this behavior. We do know, though, that it is not typically a behavior that we need to be concerned about. It's something that, and it could be that it's potentially all of these things. It could be that, because they can't catch the prey, maybe they are frustrated, or maybe they are kind of simulating killing the prey because they can't actually go do it. But for the most part, this is a behavior that doesn't tend to cause cats to be stressed. So you don't typically see cats doing this, exhibiting a lot of anxiety, but it is something kind of interesting that most kitties will do. Okay, so scent and pheromones is kind of the big way that cats are going to communicate with each other. Okay, so cats, in addition to some vocalizations, the big way that they tend to communicate with each other is usually through scent. And there's a bit of a difference between true scent and pheromones. So scent is something that you are actually sensing and smelling through the nose. And pheromones are chemicals that are actually sent through something called the vomeronasal organ, which is in the brain. And so there are actually two different things that are occurring. So scent is sort of a different part of the brain where that is processed versus where pheromones are processed. And so as far as scent in general, as far as scent goes, usually those are urine and feces. And so urine and fecal scents will be used for sexual reasons. So obviously cats will spray with urine when we are trying to attract mates, when we're in heat, things like that, because it gives off information about hormone levels that cats can smell. And then of course territorial reasons, so they will use urine and feces to mark territory. Now, pheromones, this tends to be the more common way that cats are sensing each other and communicating with each other. And so what a pheromone is this is actually a chemical that triggers a response in members of the same species. So as far as scent goes, scents are something that all species can sense. So, your dog can smell the urine just the same as you can smell the urine, just the same as another cat can smell urine. And so scent is something that can be processed by all species, whereas pheromones are very species specific. So feline pheromones are not something that can be processed by humans or by dogs. So a feline pheromone is not something that's going to have any effect on a dog or a bird or another animal of a different species. And same thing as far as other species would go. So dog pheromones are not going to have effect on cats. And so cats have multiple glands that actually will release pheromones. And so these glands are located in several different places over the body. There are actually multiple places on the head where they have these glands. So the big ones are like the forehead and the cheeks. And then they also have a area kind of at the base of their tail that will actually release pheromones as well. And one of the other big ones is the paw pads. So mostly they're using the scent glands, usually on their face and on their paw pads to communicate. And so as far as these pheromones go, the facial pheromones, so the pheromones they're releasing from glands on their head and their face, tend to essentially be what we would call friendly pheromones. So these are the pheromones that they are releasing when we are happy and when we want to associate something with a good feeling or a good sense. And so this is why cats, like in this top picture up here, this is why cats will kind of rub heads together, or why your cat kind of head butts you, or why they will kind of rub their face on things around the house. So they're depositing pheromones. And so these pheromones are just basically to kind of say, this is my person or my friend, or this is just kind of my space. But these are kind of considered the good, happy, friendly pheromones, the ones in the face. But then the ones in the paw pads are essentially marking pheromones. So these are used more to mark territory. So this is why cats will scratch specific surfaces, not just for claw sharpening, but also because these glands in the paws are leaving pheromones that are marking pheromones. And these are kind of the pheromones that say, this is mine, leave it alone. And so these are not necessarily your friendly pheromones. These are your, I'm claiming this space type of pheromone. So I believe, yes, so that moves us into scratching in general. And so, as I had mentioned, one of the big reasons cats will scratch is to mark territory. So they're marking territory with these scent glands in the paws. And so you will actually see even declawed cats will scratch. My own kitty was declawed when I got him, and he still scratches everything. So it's not necessarily just because we're sharpening our claws. It's because when they're doing this, they're leaving pheromone scents on things that say, hey, this is mine, this is my area. And so not only does it leave scent when they scratch, it actually it serves to actually form a visual marker. So it's sort of for other cats to be able to see the scratches, as well as smell and sense the pheromones, to say, hey, this is another cat's territory, stay away. And so not only is it just for the pheromone purposes, but visual purposes too. And then, of course, they do scratch to sharpen their claws as well. And so that is actually pretty important for cats that are not declawed. So even cats that are declawed will scratch, but cats that do have claws do need to sharpen those claws. And so it's actually really important for them to be able to scratch so that we're not getting things like ingrown nails and things like that. And then, of course, it does allow stretching. So a lot of times cats will scratch because it allows them to stretch, stretches those leg muscles, stretches the toes, things like that. And so as far as what kitties like to scratch, it kind of depends on the cat. And so some cats prefer to scratch vertically. So they will like to scratch vertical surfaces, walls, things like that. Some cats prefer to scratch horizontal surfaces. So some cats are more likely to scratch like areas on the floor or things like that. And then, of course, the big thing is location. And so most cats are going to scratch areas that they want to claim or that they want to kind of ward other animals off of. So typically areas where we're going to see cats scratching would be around doorways a lot of times. Another place that they will scratch is, so if they have an area where they like to lay, a lot of times they'll scratch that just because they're trying to kind of claim it. And so one of the big problem behaviors, if you will, that we see in cats is cats scratching in areas where we don't want them to scratch. And so when we get kitties that are scratching up furniture, scratching up walls, things like that, we need to figure out how do we get these kitties to scratch where we do want them to scratch and not scratch where we don't want them to scratch. And so essentially, what we need to do is kind of a twofold solution. And so what we want to do is we want to deter them from scratching the areas that we want them to avoid. And that can be something like a physical barrier. So if a cat is scratching a particular area of the house, or if there's a particular chair or something like that we're scratching, we can potentially block that area off or block that object off to keep them away from it. Or another option would be to make that surface unpleasant for them to scratch. And so things like foil, sticky tape, chicken wire, things like that are kind of unpleasant on their feet can be things that we can use to make that specific surface sort of unpleasant for them. But we can't just use deterrents. So deterrents by themselves are not going to solve our problem because we're just going to find somewhere else to scratch. So we also need to give them an alternative. So we need to give them, a scratching post, a scratching pad. And some cats are very picky about what they will scratch. And so it is important to kind of determine what does your particular kitty like to scratch? So some cats prefer things like the cardboard scratchers. Some cats prefer more something that feels a little more like cloth. So sometimes it's kind of just determining, okay, what type of surface does the kitty like to scratch? And then we need something that's going to mimic what they are scratching. So if we are scratching walls, then we need to offer them a vertical scratching post or scratching pad. If we are scratching carpets or floors, then we need to offer them something nice and flat to scratch. And ideally, we'll want to put those scratching posts or scratching pads near the same area where they are scratching. And so if we're marking doorways, we want to deter them from, scratching the doorway itself, but we want to give them a scratching post or a scratching pad near that area so that they can still mark that area, claim that area without, obviously destroying your house or your furniture, things like that. So same thing if we have a certain couch or certain chair or something like that we like that we're scratching, you want to give them a scratching post or a scratching pad kind of near that area so they can still kind of claim it without actually scratching up the furniture. And one of the products that is out there that can kind of help with this, it's this guy right here, the Scratch. And what that is it is actually a pheromone product. And so we talked a little bit about the pheromones. So this actually mimics the pheromone that cats have in their paws, that is a marking pheromone. And so this sort of mimics that marking pheromone. But it also has a dye in it. And so what you'll actually do is you want to make like stripes essentially and put it on the area that you want the cat to scratch. And so because like we talked about, it's important for the scratching area, the areas they are scratching, it is important to be not just a pheromone marker, but a visual marker. And so the Scratch is colored so that it can provide sort of a visual as well as a scent mark for the cats. And so you actually kind of take this and you put it on the scratching posts or the scratching pads where you want the cat to scratch, and it encourages them to scratch those areas versus the areas that we don't want them to scratch. Okay, so moving on to more problem behaviors we see in our kitties. Conflict between cats. And so this is another issue that I tend to get a lot of questions about. And so cats that live with other kitties in the household do not always get along well. And so when we're seeing conflict between cats, why does this happen and what can we do to sort of mitigate that? And so obviously signs of that, fighting clearly would be a sign. Urine marking can also be a sign that kitties are not getting along. And so urine marking is something that we will often see as an issue with one particular cat in the house. And we often tend to think that that's just an issue with that cat in particular, but that can actually be a sign that there's conflict going on between cats in the house. And that is why we're seeing urine marking behavior. So urine marking is not always just a solitary issue because of one cat. Sometimes it's because there's conflict between the cats, and that's why we're marking. And then, of course, hiding. So a lot of people don't necessarily see this as an issue if one cat tends to hide a lot, but this can actually be a sign that we have some conflict going on. So not all cats will, just be fighting and, hiss and swat and growl at each other. Sometimes you'll just see one cat that hides frequently, and that can indicate that there's a problem going on between the kitties. And so almost always the cause for conflict is competition for resources. So I said we were going to kind of come back around to the whole cats being very territorial thing. And so this tends to be the root cause of most of our conflict between kitties. And so obviously, space and territory is kind of a big one. Another thing that we are competing for is food. And then a third one is actually litter boxes. So litter boxes are kind of a big deal for kitties, and it is seen as a resource similar to food. So solutions to that are, for the territory issue, would be providing cats kind of safe spaces or areas that are just theirs. And so safe spaces for cats can be anything from, a kitty tree to little kitty shelves to, a little hiding area. But we need to make sure that each cat kind of has a place that they can go that can just be theirs, that can be kind of a safe space that they can claim just as their space. And then, of course, separating resources for each cat. So if food is one of the contentious points between cats, one of the things that can be done is either sort of meal feeding cats in separate areas. So perhaps feeding cats in different rooms, or they do have automatic feeders now that actually will release food or kind of open and close, and signaling with either the pet's microchip, or they'll have little collars. So if we have an issue with one kitty's kind of stealing all the food, and that's a point of contention, then these automatic feeders can be helpful for that, because they will only open for that specific cat. And so those tend to be things that are very helpful. And then as far as litter boxes go, so there are cats that will either not use a litter box that another cat has used, or there are cats that will actually kind of be bullies, essentially, and will keep other cats from using the litter box or attack them when they're trying to use the litter box. Making sure that you have enough litter boxes in enough places for all the kitties in the household, making sure that, if there's one cat that's kind of being very territorial over a litter box, that the other cat or the other cats have another option to use. And then there are some pheromone products that are out there specifically for helping with conflict between kitties. So the Feel Away Multi-Cat is a pheromone product specifically for cats in multi-cat households that are exhibiting behaviors such as fighting and marking and things like that. And so this pheromone product is actually, it mimics the cheek pheromones, so those friendly pheromones that we talked about that cats release from the facial glands. And so that pheromone, it just kind of makes everybody a little bit friendlier, essentially, because we're releasing those friendly, happy pheromones in the air, so that we hopefully get along a little bit better. Okay. All right, and so now the biggie. So this tends to be the most common behavior issue that we see with kitties. So this is inappropriate urination. So cats that are peeing outside of the litter box. And this can be due to many, many reasons. And so it's not always something that is kind of super easy to pinpoint the specific cause. And so there can be multiple reasons why cats will pee outside the litter box. And one of those big reasons would be what we call litter box aversion, which basically means the cat does not like the litter box for some reason. And sometimes we have to kind of do a little bit of digging just to kind of figure out, okay, well, why do we not like the litter box? So the big one tends to be location. And so it can either be that the litter box maybe is not in an area that is very convenient for the cat. So if the kitty spends most of its time, on the second floor and the litter box is on the first floor, or we spend most of our time on like the main floor of the house and the litter box is maybe in the basement, then the cat may urinate elsewhere because they deem that location to be undesirable. And so if it's not in a location where the cat frequents often or is very convenient for them to get to, that can be why we are not using it. And one of the big things that we tend to see a lot of times with older kitties is they may actually have trouble getting to the litter box if it's not in an area where they can get to easily. So as cats get older, if we're getting arthritic, we have to maybe do stairs to get to the litter box. They may start avoiding the litter box or not using it because it's difficult for them to get to. And so location tends to be a big one. Type of litter box. So cats can be very, very picky about what type of box they like. So I have a couple different versions on here, but a lot of people tend to like these boxes that are covered. But some cats don't particularly like that. So you may have a cat that doesn't like feeling closed in when it's using the litter box. And so they will avoid the litter box because they don't like the cover. And then, sometimes even with these high-sided litter boxes, some cats do not like that, or some cats, again, we'll see this with older kitties. If the sides of the litter box are too high and it's difficult for them to get into it, they will stop using the litter box because it's hard for them to get in there. And then this one down here, this gray box, this is a nice, like very low-sided litter box option. So for these older kitties that are having trouble getting in and out of the box, these are really nice options for those guys. So next reason why we may be not using the litter box would be we just don't like the type of litter. So cats can also be very, very picky about the substrate that they want to use. And so generally most cats will go for your typical kind of clumping clay litter. Not all cats like that. So even though a majority of cats tend to use that no issue, some cats are just not a fan. So sometimes you have to kind of, play a little bit of litter roulette with them, kind of see what they like. So usually for those kitties, what we'll do is we'll have people kind of try some different options. So different types of litter. Usually one of the big things we're looking for is if they have a scented litter. Some cats are not a fan of the scented litters. And so you want to make sure you're reaching for something that's non-scented. But I have had some cats that were outdoor kitties that became indoor kitties that would not use a litter box. They would beg to go outside to go to the bathroom because they were used to using the mulch, or they just preferred the dirt outside. And so for cats that are becoming really, really hard to litter train, if they have been used to, going outside, you know, don't be afraid to do something weird, like fill a litter box with some potting soil, fill a litter box with some mulch. I have had people use some sand just to see if their cow would use it. So give them some options. So, if do what you need to do to kind of make your cat happy. And some cats, prefer anything but the litter. So you might have to, give them other options. Okay, where are we? So the fourth reason why we'll see cats not wanting to use the litter box would be they are unhappy with how clean their litter box is kept. So cats can be very, very finicky about cleanliness. So just like some people are very, very picky about cleanliness, cats can be the same way. So there are cats that will not use a litter box if it has not been scooped from the time before. And there are cats, like I had said, I think in the last slide, that will not use a litter box that another cat has used. And so that's another one that can be an issue if we're just not super happy with how clean our box is. And then one of the big reasons that we will see cats start to avoid the litter box is pain association. So if we have had a cat that has had a UTI that has caused pain and discomfort, or this can be particularly true for cats that have blocked and that have been painful, or even cats. So sometimes we won't just see inappropriate peeing, we'll see inappropriate defecation. So cats that are pooping outside the litter box, a lot of times is due to this because they're associating pain with the litter box. So if they've had a painful event in the litter box, then a lot of times they will start to avoid it because they associate that pain with the litter box. And so if they have recently, had a bout of an infection or something like that, and they were painful, and now we are continuing to urinate outside the litter box, it definitely could be that now we have this pain association associated with the litter box. And something else that we'll occasionally see sometimes too is if there is another cat in the house sometimes that has kind of attacked us or something like that when we were in the litter box, then we'll see sort of a fear association too that can be kind of similar to the pain association. So that can happen as well. And then, so litter box aversion, usually one of kind of the big reasons why we're peeing outside the litter box. Another reason obviously is marking. So even your spayed and neutered cats can still mark for reasons other than hormone driven reasons. And so one of the big ones that we'll see is if we brought a new pet into the home, or if a new person has moved into the home, sometimes even after people have brought babies home from the hospital, this can cause the cat to want to start marking because we're now trying to claim territory again. So they sort of feel like their territory is being impinged upon by new pets in the household or new people in the household. So now we're trying to mark things. And so that's one of the big causes that we'll see cats sort of starting to pee outside the litter box all of a sudden if there's been a big change like that. Another reason, so if there are, animals outside, so if you have feral cats that are outside, or not even necessarily cats, if there are, possums, skunks, things like that, potentially even that are outside that are around the house, if your cat can sense those, animals, or even just see those animals outside, they may start marking again to claim territory, because they are sensing those other critters outside that they feel like are sort of impinging upon their territory. Stress and fear tends to be a big one. So just kind of stress in general. Sometimes we will see cats sort of act out, if you will, and they will start urinating outside the litter box because of stress. And so stress and fear is another big reason why we will see cats start to do this. And then there are definitely medical issues that can cause cats to start urinating outside the litter box. So infections, bladder stones, or cystitis. And so when we talk about correcting some of these behaviors, big things that we want to focus on are giving cats options. In households with multiple cats, kind of a rule of thumb is 1 litter box per cat plus an extra. And so if we have 3 kitties in the house, ideally we would want 4 litter boxes. So we would want each cat to have a litter box, and then we would want sort of an extra litter box. So we want to make sure everybody has options. So that way, if we do have kitties who won't use one of the other cat's litter boxes, they have an option to have a litter box that's just theirs. Other things I had talked about, giving cats different litter options, trying different types of boxes. So trying a lower litter box or just taking the cover off sometimes will solve the issue. And then one of the big things when we are trying to correct urine marking that we want to do is we want to actually use something to get rid of the urine scent that has gotten onto furniture or carpet or floors or things like that. So if cats can still smell the urine, they will tend to want to keep using that area or keep marking that area, particularly if we're doing territorial marking. So one of the big things is using specific cleaners to get rid of that. And so the big thing you want to do is you want to use something that is an enzymatic cleaner. So enzymatic cleaners actually will use enzymes to break down the urine and to break down the molecules in the urine that are causing the smell. And so sometimes even with some cleaners, we can't smell it, but the cats can still smell it. So they have a much stronger sense of smell than we do. So if you're not using something with enzymes in there to really break that down, the cats can still sense that. They still might want to go for that area. So that's kind of a big one, is making sure that we're getting rid of the scent of urine in the areas where they've gone that we don't want them to go. And then now we're going to kind of go into some reasons why. I need to go back. No, 1 second. Go back on my slides real quick here.
Just real quick, we're running a little bit low on time.
Okay, this should be my last thing I'm going to go over, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to touch on idiopathic cystitis really quickly, because this is something that we do see really commonly in a lot of cats, and this tends to be a big issue with kitties as far as behavioral issues go. And so a lot of these cats that are exhibiting inappropriate urination actually have something called idiopathic cystitis. So this is inflammation in the bladder. It is not due to infection. It doesn't have a specific cause. We really don't know why some cats develop this, but we do know that it does tend to be related to anxiety, and we do see it a lot more in indoor kitties. And so one of the big issues with this is ruling out, is this behavioral versus truly a medical issue? And so usually one of the big ways that we treat this is by reducing stress. So once again, we're going to go back to our pheromone products, the Feel Away. This is the newer one. It's Feel Away Optimum. And so this one actually combines a few different pheromones. And then we use diet as well. And so there are diets that can help with stress. So the one here is the Hills CD urinary stress diet. And so this not only helps with urinary symptoms, but it also helps with stress as well. And so most of the kitties that we see that are experiencing this have some level of anxiety. One of the things that we are trying to control with this disease is reducing their anxiety. And usually a big reason why we are experiencing anxiety is typically because they are having some of the behavioral issues that we talked about above. So this is a medical issue. So it actually is a medical condition that does tend to stem from some behavioral and cause some behavioral issues. So just wanted to kind of touch on the cystitis, because this is something that can look a lot like a behavioral urinary issue, but actually does have a medical cause, and actually is something that we treat a little bit differently. So, okay. And then I just have some behavior resources listed here. So the Indoor Pet Initiative is a good one. They have a lot of information regarding cats and behavior and problem issues in kitties. And then Veterinary Partner is another good source of information. And then Cat Friendly Homes is a good website. So they have a lot of good info on there as well. Okay, so that is all. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, either raise your hand, you can type it in the chat as well. And because, we're running a little bit short on time, I'm thinking maybe if Dr. Ritchey is up for it, maybe someday we'll host a Zoom question and answer.
Sure, yeah, that would be good.
So yeah, if people need to hop off for whatever reason, just be on the lookout for that. I'll send everyone who attended an email, but feel free to hang out and ask your questions in the chat or raise your hand. And it looks like Emily has a question. Emily.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm not muted. Good. Okay.
Yep.
I have a new kitty. She was rescued from a hoarding situation with 45 other cats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's a year old. She is living in my bedroom. She loves my other two cats. She likes me. However, when I engage her in petting and stroking, she'll take a swing at me. And I don't know if she's being playful, or I think she's being playful, but she also has claws. So can I discourage that without, I want her to interact with me, but I don't want her to take a swing at me and scratch me.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that definitely could be play. A lot of that is probably because being in a hoarding situation, we probably were not super well socialized.
Mm-hmm.
And so for cats that have not really been socialized super well with humans, they tend to not necessarily know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So they tend to be a little rough. And so even if we are potentially just playing, they haven't had that chance to kind of learn that we're being a little too rough. And so You know, what I would say is if she's tending to do it kind of every time you're trying to pet her, it definitely could be that she's just very much not used to that. And so I would probably start out maybe actually petting her with like something else versus your hand. That way, if she is trying to go after it, she's not getting you until she kind of gets more used to being petted. And then kind of as she gets more used to being touched and being petted, then, you know, you can start kind of getting a little more hands-on essentially with her. But a lot of these kitties, you know, if she, you know, is from a hoarding situation like that, she probably just isn't really used to a lot of like affection and human touch. And so sometimes it's just getting them used to that human touch. So a lot of times, you know, you might want to start with, you know, petting her with even just like getting a toy or something, pet her with like a little toy wand, just kind of get her used to getting touched when you're there, and then kind of slowly, you know, moving forward from there with her.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So do you have any tips for introducing our new cats? I have two 5-month-old cats, and I also have a dog in the house. And we've been feeding them kind of behind closed doors, trying to get each other used to the scent. Do you have any tips for introducing them?
Yeah. So as far as introducing them, so far you said you've had them like behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Have they been able to kind of smell each other through the doors or like anything like that?
I mean, I put their food, so I'll put my dog's food on one side of the door and then my cat's food on the other side of the door. And I think they're able to like smell through the door. I'm not really sure. We're working on it with the dog, but as far as the cats go, I'm not
Yeah. So as we talked about, pheromone and scent is something that is super important for cats, especially when they're kind of getting to know each other. And so one of the things that can definitely be helpful with cats when we're trying to kind of introduce them to each other is if you have like blankets or toys or things like that from each cat. I would probably take maybe like one of the kitty beds that the other cats like to lay on, put that in with the new cat, and take something of the new cat's, like a toy or something we like, or maybe a blanket, give that to the other cats, give them things of each other's that they can smell and kind of get used to each other's scent. So that will help kind of get them more familiar with each other's scents first. And that way, when you do actually introduce them in person, they'll be like, they can kind of recognize that they've smelled that scent before. They recognize that cat specific scent. And so that's something that can be very helpful. Another thing too is if you are able to do like baby gates or something like that, where they can kind of see and smell each other through a barrier without actually being able to get to each other, that's also very helpful, because then they can kind of sniff each other. They can see each other. If they choose to kind of interact through that barrier, they can, but if they don't want to, they have separate areas they can go to. And then also, like we talked about, just also making sure that, you know, if they don't necessarily want to hang out, that they have separate areas that they can go. So when you know, if you've kind of introduced them through barriers and we're getting along well and things are going good, and you know, I think we're going to do okay, you know, fully introducing them, basically just kind of let them come in contact with each other naturally. So don't necessarily force them into like a little small room together. Just kind of let them naturally come in contact with each other, but make sure that they have places that they can go to be separate if they want to.
Okay.
But it sounds like you're doing good with like the feeding, you know, behind doors, things like that. That's definitely kind of good first step, because you're associating good things like food with them being together. So that's definitely a good start. I would say next step would be, offer them things from the other pet that they can kind of sniff and smell, and then see how we do if you kind of introduce them through a barrier.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just had one quick question about our cat. Our cat's
Sure.
about 15 or 16 years old. Always slept on our bed, no problem through the night. About the past 2 months, and you might hear him now, he has the loudest meow. So he will get up at like 3 and just sit outside in the hallway and just do this like loud meowing until, he wants you to get up and do something. But it's so disruptive, and so loud that we literally can't sleep. So this is like every night now. So I just don't know like what we can do about that.
Yeah, and so this is a very new behavior for him. Yes.
In the past couple months.
Okay.
But like nothing changed here. Like we didn't get a new dog or a new pet or, it's just my husband and I, we're empty nesters. So nothing in the home changed.
And he said he's like 15. Yes.
Yeah. Like 15, 16.
Okay. So couple things that makes me think of. So being that we're an older kitty, I would be a little bit concerned about if we are potentially having like a health issue that could be causing us to do that. Things that could be causing this would be if we're experiencing pain, or sometimes we'll see behavior changes develop in cats that are developing like hyperthyroidism. So they can start to develop some strange behaviors, and that's something that we'll see a lot in older cats. So definitely want to rule out that there's, not anything medically going on that would be making him do that. And then one of the other things that could be going on is we will see cats, older cats and dogs can actually develop what we call cognitive dysfunction, which is very similar to like dementia, Alzheimer's disease in people. And these pets will start to exhibit behavior changes, particularly in their sleep cycles. And so that can cause them to all of a sudden not want to sleep at night, or a lot of times they will start to develop symptoms of, panting, pacing, like you said, meowing a lot, because they are confused, or it's just and they're having anxiety, and things like that. So being that we're an older kitty, I'm thinking this could potentially be something medical. Could be that maybe we're developing a little bit of like a kitty dementia. Could definitely also just be stress. So I would definitely say if you haven't tried like one of the pheromone products like the Feel Away, that's definitely something I would try out to see if you're seeing any improvement with that. But I think definitely kind of getting him checked, making sure he doesn't have any medical issues too would be a good
Yeah,
step.
we have an appointment for him for this weekend. But thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have some comments in the chat here. Valentina Rippey says, "Thank Mew." Nice little pun there. Someone named Beth Newborg says, "Wonderful, Dr. Ritchie. Thank you, and thanks from our kitty Nutmeg."
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, and hopefully we can have you back, and we can do like an ask the vet program.
Yeah, that would be great. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, this was great. Thank you guys all for coming. Thanks for questions. Yeah, if anyone had any questions they didn't get to ask me, Anna has my email, so she can always kind of get touch base with me if need be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you to Dr. Ritchie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.